Hey everybody, in this video I want to show you guys how to win fights with building as a beginner level player. And before we get into specific strategies that you need to practice, it's important to talk about why we build in the first place. And I think all of you have pretty much the same answer. You would say that building helps you stay protected and move around safely, it helps you recover from mistakes, it helps you climb up to high ground quickly, and it gives you chances to trap your opponents and limit their options. All of those things are true, but they don't really help you win fights decisively on their own. And that can be frustrating if you've watched my old videos especially, and I mean it's great to learn how to climb with side jumps and 90s or to move safely with tunnels, trapping your opponents with piece control, but that's not why you guys are watching this video, right? You're watching because you want to learn how to use building to win fights. And the core skills that win fights are so simple. Everything starts with learning how to put yourself inside a box and use peeks. Peeking allows you to deal damage without taking damage. And an important feature of peeks that you need to understand is called Peeker's Advantage. One way to visualize Peeker's Advantage is by looking at this peeking situation where two players are both trying to jump and shoot each other. In this situation, whoever jumps first loses. On my screen, if I jump when I see my opponent jump, I know that I'll be able to shoot them, but they can't shoot me back. And that's just because of the latency or the delay between what's happening on my screen and what's happening on my opponent's screen. It takes time for that information to be sent from my screen to the Fortnite servers and then to my opponent's screen. To help you guys understand that a little bit better, let's take a look at this. Here we have two players moving around in close range. What I'm trying to do on my screen is copy how that player moves. When they move right, I move right. When they move left, I move left. But look at what my opponent sees on their screen. It's the complete opposite. What they see on their screen is not at all the same as what you see on your screen. And that delay is the whole reason why peeking should be the main focus of your building and editing practice. And if that idea still doesn't make sense to you, you might need to watch my recent video about peeking. And that video should be showing up right here. Now, I know this is a beginner building video, but I'm making it with the assumption that you have already played around with building and editing a little bit. Hopefully you know what button lets you switch between combat mode and build mode, which button you have to press to start an edit, and you have some idea of the different edits you can make with floors, walls, cones, and ramps. If you're brand new, you might need to wait for my new video, and I'll make sure to title that video something like How to Build in Fortnite for Brand New Players. And I'll make sure to cover settings and binds and everything you need to set yourself up to start building well. But now let's start with boxing up as that main strategy to use in fights. And by the way, for those of you who just want to be fast, aggressive players, you should know that boxing up is not just a defensive strategy. For example, if I'm trying to put on aggressive pressure against a defensive opponent, a quick box up gives me more offensive options to use in a fight. For example, it gives me the chance to dive through a player's wall or use quick edits to counter my opponent's plays. Learning to quickly box up helps you break the worst habit that so many of you guys have. When you're fighting, you need to build first and shoot second, not the other way around. If you shoot first and build second, your opponent will just block your shots, and that makes it so much harder for you to finish the fight, control the fight, and win decisively. Building first and shooting second is just that main mantra that you've got to keep in the back of your mind while playing, because it puts you in positions where you can actually use safe peeks and piece control to play aggressively. But let's rewind and get into the actual mechanics of boxing up, starting with placing walls. If you spin around while placing walls, they might place too far away. That's because your positioning matters. If I'm standing in the middle of a floor, I can spin around while looking anywhere and place just 4 walls around me. But if I'm standing on the edge or a corner of a floor, I might end up placing 8 walls around me, and that's bad. I might accidentally trap my opponent inside this space, and I'm using way too many materials. When you're fighting and you need to box up, it's hard to keep track of where you're standing on a floor. So instead of trying to move toward the center of a floor, just look down. As you can see here, even if I'm standing on the corner of a floor, all I have to do is look straight down and then spin around to place 4 walls. And those walls will always place directly around me. And once you place those 4 walls, you can jump and place 2 cones. And notice here, I don't have to aim up or down to place 2 cones. Those cones will connect to the wall that I'm aiming at. If you aim above the halfway point of the wall, the cone places above. Below the halfway point, the cone places below. The simplest way to box up is to stop moving, look straight down, spin around as you place 4 walls, and then jump as you place those 2 cones. Now that you're inside a box, it's important to practice some defensive plays first. As a beginner level player, one of the hardest things to do is deal with those players who aggressively break and replace your walls, or players who just jump right through your walls and end up right on top of you. The first thing you need to practice to deal with that type of thing is called pre-firing. Pre-firing happens every time you shoot a player as a wall breaks. And there are two things to focus on while practicing your pre-fires: timing and aim. Your pre-fire should happen immediately after the wall breaks, not before, not after. You don't have any time. There's no gap between the wall breaking and you shooting. If there's any gap, your opponent just places a wall and blocks your shot. You can practice with a target dummy or a sentry guard in your own creative map just to get the hang of the timing, but it's even better to practice with a friend. The second thing to focus on after timing is aim. When you're trying to pre-fire as a wall breaks, you can't just lazily keep that player somewhere on your screen. As the wall's breaking, that player has to be right behind your crosshair because there's no time as the wall breaks for you to adjust your aim. That means you have to be actively using your aiming skills as the wall breaks. If you get really good at pre-firing, you'll be able to win fights against a lot of aggressive opponents without needing to do anything else. For example, if you can pre-fire a player jumping through your wall, you have a huge health advantage and you can just win the fight by shooting the player with your AR or SMG. However, a skilled player might not let you pre-fire. For example, if a player shoots your wall until it's weak and then finally breaks it with their shotgun, you can't pre-fire that. It's just not possible to react that quickly. But if a player swings their pickaxe or sprays your wall with their AR or SMG, that's where you can try to pre-fire. After learning how to pre-fire, the next step for using builds to win fights is to practice using edits to make peaks. And from inside a box, there's always a best edit peak to look for, but it all depends on where the enemy player is standing. For example, if a player is standing right outside your box, the most common edit most of you would make is a peanut butter edit, and that's wrong. And it's wrong for a couple reasons. First, when you make that edit against a player who's standing right outside your box, they can just jump and get the first shot with peeker's advantage. They can also jump right inside your box. It would be better to make a middle window or a right window and try to look for a safe right-hand peek, but then you still might run into that same problem where that player tries to left-hand peek just running and they end up getting the first shot, because remember, even a left-hand peek gives you peeker's advantage as long as you're moving fast and sticking close to the angle. So in this situation where a player's right in front of your box, instead of peeking through that wall, you need to back up and peek from on top of your cone. If you use this 6-tile wall edit, it makes it difficult for a player who's just trying to run inside your box. It can catch them off guard as they swing their pickaxe, and it gives you 2 lines of defense to work with. I can reset the wall and I can use the cone to protect myself if I need to. So I've got 2 builds to work with in between me and the player. And that's a good rule to keep in mind. This wall edit is difficult to make, but it's one of the best peaks you can use in this very common situation. So you just have to practice over and over and over again until it gets consistent and smooth. Outside of that common situation, you've got to learn a bunch of extra peaks based on where your opponent is standing. For example, if your opponent is not right in front of this wall, you can make a peanut butter edit. This is a great place to jump and shoot, knowing that you have peeker's advantage because you're closer to this peak angle. Outside of that common situation, you've got to learn a bunch of extra peaks based on where your opponent is standing. For example, if your opponent is not right in front of this wall, you can make a peanut butter edit. This is a great place to jump and shoot, knowing that you have peeker's advantage because you're closer to this peak angle. If the enemy player is right in front of your box on top of a ramp like this or elevated, you might not be able to make this 6-tile edit because look at what that player sees on his screen. It's very easy for that player to shoot you from that position. So instead, it'll be more helpful for you to do something like this, a bottom right 3-tile edit so that you can safely shoot that player in the feet. And look at what that player sees on his screen. He's not able to see you as you isolate that shot. If your opponent is above your box, you might need to press yourself into the front left of this wall here to give yourself a right-hand peek, and then you can jump and shoot the player. You can also back up and edit this floor as a balcony here and jump and shoot them in the head. With the cone, you might need to edit that cone to give yourself some kind of angle like this. If you need to pressure a player from directly above, knowing that those jump shots are so strong, instead of doing that from high ground, I might need to edit my floor here and then try to pressure this player from this angle here. This is a much safer peek where I can stand up and shoot the player from high ground. So hopefully here you can see, based on the different positions, there's a puzzle that you need to solve. And that puzzle is always different, and there's always a best way to solve it. And those are the kinds of things that you need to be working on as you practice with building. Just make sure that those 2 things that you're most focused on is putting yourself into a box and trying to shoot as your walls break. And then from there, trying to choose the correct edit based on the situation. So if that player is right in front of you, you make your 6-tile edit and you peek from behind your cone here. If the player is further away, you jump from behind your peanut butter. If your opponent is on high ground, you get close to this wall and you shoot them from here. If that doesn't give you the angle, you back up and you shoot them from this edit right here. That's it. That's peeks. There are so many extra peek angles that you might need to learn though. For example, if a player is peeking you from that position right here, there's not much I can do besides change my cone into a ramp and peek from this left-hand peek right here. But we'll talk about those things in the next part of this beginner building series, where we get into reboxing and moving around more and doing all of the fun stuff like side jumps, high ground retakes, tunneling skills, and piece control. But for now, focus on boxing up, focus on your peeks, focus on your pre-fires. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for using code Billy-Bicep in the item shop, and I'll see you guys next time.